The Second Battle of Ypres was fought in April and May of 1915. This was Canada's first major battle overseas, and our first division was involved, and that's kind of a weird way to say it because Canada only had one division at that point in time. So if you were in the Canadian military and you were overseas, you were fighting in the Second Battle of Ypres. So that we can locate where we're talking about, this area on the map here is the English Channel, and Belgium is this country in here. France, northern France, is in here, so this is the areas of Flanders and Normandy. And if you take a look on your map for the letter A, you will find the town of Ypres. Ypres is just inside the Belgian border. It is a bicycle ride to go from Ypres to the border here. Okay, so it's very, very close. It's called the Second Battle of Ypres because this is the spot where the French and the British forces in 1914 stopped the German Schlieffen Plan. If you remember, the Schlieffen Plan was the German plan to sweep through Belgium and swing around once they got into France and attack Paris. They got stopped at the Belgian border, which was a huge surprise to them. And this will sort of become the first in the line that's going, the trench line that will stretch between the coast and Switzerland. So this is where the first real battles were fought. There are going to be more battles in this area. At least 3 major ones will be held on pretty much the same ground. This is the Canadian Army's debut on the field of combat. Like I said, our entire army was there, so it's 1st Division. It's also the first time on the Western Front that gas gets used. And I say, first of all, I'm careful about the language here because it is on the Western Front. The Germans had been using gas on the Eastern Front only 3 weeks prior to this, to absolutely devastating effect. And the British High Command was very aware of that usage. The gas that was being used, well, there were 2 gases. There was chlorine gas, which is the one that was going to be used at this one. And then there was sulfur gas, which also got used a fair amount during this war. So why am I stressing that it's about being on the Western Front? And that's because this is the soldiers' first encounter with this stuff. They will never have encountered this before. They've never heard about it. They don't know what to do with it. And the worst part is that their superiors never told them to expect this, probably because they had no solution for them. So it's pretty hard to tell your men, hey, by the way, you've got this really nasty weapon coming at you, but we don't know how to help you defend yourself against it. So they just kept quiet and didn't tell the men anything. So I've asked on your notes, was gas used before this, when, and to what effect? And if you've been listening, you should be able to answer that one quite easily. I've also asked, why weren't the men told about the new weapon? I'd like you to also not just write down what I wrote, but could you also add in there what your opinion is? Should the men have been told? This is an actual photograph taken from one of the observation balloons. Both sides would put up hot air balloons with photographers. And this is one of the ones that it obviously came from the German side. But you can see the line where the canisters of gas hit. And all along in here, and you can tell which way the wind was blowing. You had to be careful when you were using gas, because if you had gas or had the wind going the wrong direction, you'd kill your own men. But it's fairly precise, and actually if you take a look down here, you can almost see the trench line. So you can see how very accurate they were about hitting that front trench line. Okay, this is the battle map that you have, and you're going to need to use 3 different colors. So you've already learned how to use that little squiggle icon in the shapes thing, so you're going to need to pick that up. And what I'd like you to do at this point is to take a look here, and what we're going to look at is the very first line that we had. So this section in here is the opening line, and we're going to be a little more detailed about that in just a minute. So we're going to look at the structure of the battle. So along the front line, the Canadians were in the center, the French were on the left, and the British were on the right. So on your map, now I want you to pick up your squiggly icon. Remember, go to Insert, Shapes, and then pick up the squiggly icon. Then I want you to trace over the line that is the area where the French were. Do it again for where the Canadians were, and again for where the British were. Change the weight of the line so that it's a little bit heavier, and also change the color so each one of them is a different color. Mine looks like this. So I've got the green for where the French are, so their opening position is here. For right now, this part of the line, ignore this. Right now, we're just looking at this part of the line here. The British I've got in red, and they're down here. And the Canadians are in blue, and we're in the middle right in here. Okay, so you can see that the French have a little bit more area than we do. The British also have more area, but we've got about 4 miles that we have to cover right in here.
In French, have a little bit more area.
Sorry about that, guys. For some reason, my translator went off in my iPhone. Forget it. Now let's carry on. We're going to continue looking at the structure of the battle. So, between the Canadians and the French, there was a wooded area called Kitchener's Woods. Have a look at the spelling of it here, and we're going to draw it on the map. So on your map, you've got this area right in here. So just in behind where the French are, I want you to draw in Kitchener's Woods. For this, again, you can use the freestyle or the squiggly tool and then color it in, maybe put in a text box calling it Kitchener's Woods. Now, the French that were on the battlefield were not France French. They were actually Algerians. And if you remember, when we dealt with the events that led up to the war, one of them was that in Algeria there had been a revolution, or an attempted revolution, but they lost. And so they remained as a French colony. But you can imagine that the people would have been very, very upset and annoyed. Here they were trying to become independent, break away from France. And yet now here they are involved in a war. They're having to wear French uniforms and fight on behalf of the French. Now the Germans launched a gas attack at the French lines first. Now this wasn't accident, it wasn't coincidence, they did this on purpose. There's a long-standing feud between France and Germany. Remember, they had just finished fighting the Franco-Prussian War. There was all that stuff about Alsace and Lorraine. So they were they were very happy, the Germans were very happy to attack the French line first. So they launched this new weapon against the French first, not really getting that they weren't France French, that they were Algerian French. So what was the gas and what effect did it have on the soldiers? I want you to leave a space on your notes for right now. I don't have enough time on this video. I'm going to come back and we're going to have a discussion about gas and the effect that it had on the soldiers, and you're going to do a little bit of a project to do a little bit more research about it. Now, as I said, these were not the French that the Germans were used to fighting, and so they were a little bit surprised when the Algerians saw these green clouds rolling towards them, and they ran away. They retreated. And the line fell back, and that left a 4-mile gap in the line. So on your map, we're going to show that. So I want you to take your squiggly line or your freehand tool, and I want you to make your line down here. Okay, so the French retreated from this position here to this position back here. Now, what the plan was from the German perspective was that when the gas cleared, they were going to come through Kitchener's Woods, and they were going to come in behind, so they would have people on this side and people on this side prepared to attack the Canadian line and prepared to attack the British line. Please keep in mind, they really didn't know what a Canadian was at this point. They'd never encountered us. They'd never fought us before. They were really more concerned about these guys here, and they also would have been able to get in and around behind the French. So they weren't worried about the Canadians. They were worried about the French, and they were worried about the British. Silly, silly people. They were worried about the wrong ones. So the Canadians, when they saw the French retreat, realized what was going to happen. They realized they'd be caught in a pincer move, so they did something they were not supposed to do. They thinned their lines to cover the open ground on the map. And I want you to show that on your map. So you need to take the Canadian line and you need to extend it down in through here. Now the wiggly part of the line through here, that's because that's the wooded area and they can't possibly have a solid line there. And so it's kind of a porous line here, but still they are going to do their very best. So I'm almost out of time on this particular one. Come back for part 2 and we will carry on with the notes.